And trending now, and as always, I'm joined by Daisy Cousens, a YouTube star with her own video channel. Thereupon hangs a tale too. Before I go on, Daisy, though, a very nice profile of you in the Sunday Telegraph's Stellar magazine. But I was struck by reading it, going back to my interview just before the break with Mark Lopez, you say in there, that's a nice picture too, you say in there that you were a conservative at school, but you kept it secret from your friends until you had to go on the ABC's Q&A later. Why did you do that?
Well, it wasn't so much when I was at, say, high school specifically. I was lucky I was in high school before it got crazily left-wing, thank goodness. I didn't get browbeaten with that as much as kids do nowadays, poor things. It was my sort of later university days and just after that I really clamped down on any political discussion with my friends, because most of them were actors, were thespians, and of course actors are extremely left-wing, and it was ironically in actually sort of having the audacity, shall we say, to talk about right-wing politics that made me withdraw so sharply at one point. I was a huge supporter of Tony Abbott, massive supporter of Tony Abbott, you know, back in sort of 2013, 2014, and very vocal about it on social media, on Facebook, lots of, you know, Facebook arguments. And oh my goodness, Andrew, did they ever punish me for it? These so-called friends of mine. I was called every name under the sun, and eventually I thought, well, this just isn't worth it. No one's interested in having an educated discussion. All they do is sort of hurl insults. I'd better just sort of stay quiet. And that was my introduction to what we like to call the regressive left. And so it wasn't until 2016, early 2017, when I was outed as not only a conservative, but as a Trump supporter, you know, a very reluctant and sudden outing even then, shall I say, on Q&A. And let me tell you, Andrew, all hell broke loose in that friendship group from there, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, I'm reluctant to sort of talk about that because that'll be a disincentive for all those kids thinking, no, that's it, I'm keeping stum. Makes me worry about your poor old father, Peter. I don't know what his views are, but I remember working with him in the opera world. As a singer, if he was conservative, would have had to keep that to himself very quietly. Now, but, you know, going back to that question that I was asking Mark Lopez, what would your advice be to kids, you know, like uni students? Do you answer as you really think, or do you just give them back what they want?
It's a really interesting question, isn't it? I've heard a lot of people like Mark Lopez, Ben Shapiro, for instance, is a very famous American conservative commentator, give that advice and tell kids that while they are at university, if they want the marks, then they just have to regurgitate the dogma. They can talk however they want in their personal lives, you know, join the conservative activist groups if you want on campus, but look, you know, if you want to get that degree and you don't want to get marked down by prejudiced professors, well, maybe it's better to toe the line. But having said that, Jordan Peterson, you know, the philosopher, the psychiatrist and the professor, he says the opposite. He actually has a bit more faith in university professors and said, look, you know, they might be a bit left-wing, but most of them aren't so prejudiced that they will mark you down for that. So, look, I think it would. The kids are so smart nowadays. I'm sure they can probably gauge for themselves whether they've got an absolute nut job teaching them who will call anyone who gives a conservative assignment in a Nazi, or if they got a more sort of liberal-minded professor like the professors Jordan Peterson is talking about. But look, just generally though, I'd like to say to, you know, conservative young adults out there, on the subject of the question before, when I did eventually, I guess, come out as a conservative on Q&A, it was the best thing I ever did because it purged my life of a whole lot of unbelievably toxic, heinous people that I thought were my friends, but turned out to be just some of the worst people that I have ever met. And although it was a baptism of fire and it was difficult because it was deeply personal, no one likes to be called every name under the sun by people you've known and been friends with for 8, 9, 10 years. But I made new friends. I made wonderful new friends. I met my wonderful fiance, who I would never have met if I hadn't come out and done what I did. So do it. It might be hard. It'll be a baptism of fire, but you will reap the rewards, and ultimately it will be the best thing for you.
And do you really want to spend the rest of your life walking on eggshells around people whose political opinions you don't respect or share?
Exactly.
Daisy, but, you know, now that you're out and about, you've got your own video channel, you're on YouTube and all that. We've talked about how Twitter and Facebook, for instance, have tried to help Joe Biden win the election, for one, by stopping or making it harder for people to read about the emails of Biden's son Hunter, showing that he sold access to his dad when Joe was vice president to make a fortune for himself. But you've now noticed something else with the traffic of people like you who are on social media or on YouTube specifically. What is going on?
Well, it's the same pattern that big tech employs on Twitter when it comes to suppressing information. Andrew, I have noticed that over the last couple of months, my views on YouTube have just inexplicably dropped about a third at least. And this wasn't sort of a gradual progression. It happened at the 1st of August. I noticed it. Ping, like that content that I would post that I didn't change any type of my content that would normally get, you know, a particular amount of views, because you can gauge the more that you create content, got the views just completely shaved off the top. And I was worried. I thought, are people just not interested in my content anymore? But then one after another, a number of independent commentators, some conservative, some just, you know, they make memes, just general content, said the exact same thing. A large and very specific chunk of their views had just been shaved off the top sort of from August to now. And it came to a head today when a bunch of us got onto Twitter and said, hey, at YouTube, what gives? What is going on? And it is because in the lead up to the election, big tech is suppressing independent commentators. Big tech, YouTube has made no secret of the fact that they don't like independent commentators, particularly if they are conservative. They much prefer the kind of legacy media outlets, YouTube channels like CNN, MSNBC, all of those kinds of channels. One, because, you know, they're predictable, and by which I mean they are heavily left-wing. So by suppressing all of us, you know, evil independent commentators who may have a different opinion on one thing or another and promoting those legacy media channels, well, they're promoting the kind of narrative that they want, you know, the very left-wing anti-Trump narrative that they want. Just to give you one particularly heinous example, there is a YouTube independent journalist called Tim Pool, he's American, he does some fantastic journalism. Yeah. He's got a number of channels, over 1 million subscribers. His YouTube channel was blacklisted from Google searches, which is just, and it only got reinstated when he made a fuss about it.
And New York Post, of course, their Twitter account suspended for 2 weeks. Daisy Cousens, for people, I urge people to go and look at your video channel. Thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you, Andrew.